All right, folks, I'm headed to the office here. I'm going to Reddit for a topic, and this one's not actually like, I mean, we'll talk about this scenario specifically, but it's gonna be a lot more general, and it's everyone's favorite topic, which is burnout. So, another quick note, I'm driving to the office super early today. Well, not super early. I have a meeting at 8 a.m. that I do with Europe, but there's an event right after that, and my boss was suggesting that we're there in person, so I have to get to the office before the 8 a.m. meeting. So I have to leave at 7 in the morning, which is crap. And this is like the perfect time for rush hour for me, because I say perfect very sarcastically, by the way, because there's like one highway to get from where I live to Redmond, and it's gonna be everyone it's gotta drive to work. So this is gonna be fun. I don't have the 360 camera going because it's raining, and I've just kind of given up on trying to make that work in the rain. No point in me stressing about having a camera on top of my car just to have all the footage look like trash. But the Reddit topic is about burnout, and the person that was writing it, I don't have it pulled up in front of me because I'm driving now, but they're an Amazon employee, and this is not to throw shade at Amazon. This could be, you could replace Amazon with any other company, and I'm sure there are going to be people that say, yeah, but Amazon's worse, and sure, I don't have, first-hand experience from Amazon, so I'm not here to say that's the case. I literally don't have evidence of it. But this person kind of talks about their 6-year career so far, and they talk about being on a team in the beginning that's like pretty rough, and they're getting a lot of like anxiety and stress, and like it's pretty hard to, like, it's really having an impact on them. And then they end up switching teams, and they're kind of progressing through their career, right? So they're going from being, a more junior developer into like mid-level senior. Then they're on some other team that's like better for some middle part, but they're getting experience, and now they're they're getting like, there's more stress associated with the job. And then most recently, it sounds like they had to transfer teams again, or they did. I shouldn't say they had to, I'm not actually sure, but another team transition, and this is back to a toxic team. And given that they're L6, which is, I think, at Amazon L6, I think at least at manager level is what I would be considered like equivalent at Microsoft, I believe. So they're that, but an individual contributor. And now they're saying like their stresses and anxiety and everything else is so bad, like have like physical symptoms of like, like chest pain, breathing problems. They were citing that they, and this is actually going back even earlier in their career when I mentioned they were also stressed, like regularly crying from work. And I'm not saying this like I'm making fun of them. I want to be very clear about that. I don't want to say, haha, look at this idiot crying from work. Nope, absolutely not, because I think that this is unfortunately far more real for many people that than people want to admit, which is pretty awful, unfortunately. But I know this, or at least have, I shouldn't say I know, like, as a matter of fact, there are, X number of people or some percentage, that's not fair for me to say, but what I will say is the number of people that do reach out to me personally and write me messages and stuff like that talk about being stressed at work, or to the point where they're in tears or something like that, or how they're treated doesn't feel fair. All of that kind of stuff is far more prevalent than I would have ever expected. So I guess I've been fortunate in my career where I don't have such things, not to the point of crying at least. And again, I'm not making fun of anyone for that. That's a legitimate response when, you're completely overwhelmed. So I wanted to make this video to kind of draw some attention to like some things that go on in like the software engineering industry, and maybe some perspective on that as a whole. So that's why I said this video is not going to be specifically about this person's exact situation, but we can abstract it a little bit. We're software developers. We abstract things, right? Maybe that's only .NET developers. I'm not sure, but so before I keep rambling on here, just a reminder: if you want questions answered, leave them in the comments. That's where I try to focus all of my attention. If I don't have comments that are pending that I think would make really good topics, that I go to Reddit. But otherwise, my attention is in the comments that you guys leave. So please do that. If you don't want to write something in public, feel free to send me a message. Look for Dev Leader on social media. That's also my main YouTube channel. And then you can write whatever you want. I'll keep it totally anonymous because I have no need to out anyone. That's kind of not the point. I just want to be able to try and help if I'm able to. So with that said, let's chat through this. So a couple things going on here. We have things like toxic work environments. We have things like expectations that continue to grow and grow as you level up in your role. And there's an important distinction on that part in particular, because I don't think that many people recognize this. But when we talk about getting promoted, right? So you're a junior, then mid-level, senior, staff, principal, however, or whatever level numbering structure you have. The interesting part about just like getting promoted is that getting promoted actually comes with more expectation. And it's kind of interesting. I didn't really realize this personally, but from interviewing other software engineers, like on my main YouTube channel on the podcast part, I talked to people that were working overseas, and they said that, and like again, I had never really heard this before, but that it was, I don't know if I can use the word common, but maybe I can say it wasn't uncommon that people would be offered promotions and turn them down. And that's because how they look at their sort of work-life balance and stress and all that, they're like, I'm okay where I'm at, right? And I think maybe it's more of a North American perspective. Maybe it's, where people are working. I don't know what the exact demographic that maybe delineates some of this, but certainly whatever demographic I fall into is has always been, do whatever you can to keep getting promoted, right? That's how you win in your career. Keep getting promoted, like whatever the next level is, like hyper focus on what you're supposed to be doing. Which is ironic because like I keep bringing this up in videos. I've actually never been promoted once officially in my career, which is nuts, right? It's startup things. So at least in some parts of the world, or in some more specific areas of software engineering, there is this extreme focus on promotions. But what's often not spoken about is that the expectations of you when you are promoted go up and up and up. And that's why sometimes at certain levels, going to the next level actually feels like there's a ceiling, right? Some companies have what feels like a ceiling, and it's because the expectations are not linear anymore. It's not linearly increasing expectations. The expectations almost become exponential. This is why you don't have, like at Microsoft, like every developer that's been there for 20 years is automatically like a distinguished engineer. No, because at some point the expectations become exceedingly difficult to achieve and maintain. And maintain is the key word there, right? Because as the expectations go up, it's not, hey, you did the thing, boom, here's the promotion. It's, hey, you've been doing the thing. You consistently do the thing, we see you as the person who consistently does the thing. This is going to be one of the worst drives I've done in a long time, according to Google, which gives me 5 minutes to get into the office and sit down and start a meeting that I lead. And that's why it's code commute. So, yeah, when we're chasing levels, the expectations continue to go up. Now, I've also had conversations regarding, some of, I don't want to say there's like exactly specific thresholds, like, between level X and Y, like this is the threshold where this happens, but there's actually, stages in people's career where there might be more people that kind of end up at that level and never break past it. And there's a word for this, and I can't remember it, but I feel like the word that comes to mind is like a terminus or something. I've heard it before. Maybe it's just because I'm driving and I can't think of it. But anyway, it's basically like a point, some level in career where it's like totally acceptable to, keep leveling up until you're at that point, and that's a good landing point, and people will stay there for years and years and years. And that's okay, right? Because if you had someone that was a junior level engineer and they were junior for 10 years, like that probably would not be a good sign. But whether it's senior or staff or principal, whatever level, there's, within companies, there's generally this idea that, yeah, if we had people end up at this level and they stay there, that's fine. Now, some companies will have like performance-based rewards. And this is the other thing that I want people to think about. When you are achieving the next level and the expectations go up, if you have performance-based rewards, so say I'm just going to make up numbers to keep it very simple. Say you're overachieving at your level, so you get a 20% bonus, and in whatever metric that is. So a 20% bonus, okay, but now when you go up to the next level, you're not exceeding the expectations at that level. So maybe and likely your compensation as a whole has gone up, but getting that 20% bonus at that level is no longer a thing, right? Because you're not exceeding the expectation at that level. You might just be meeting them. And there are certain situations where people get promoted and they actually have a difficult time trying to maintain. Like they might have gone from exceeding to now it's difficult to even maintain the new expectations. So when this person is describing their career experience, it sounds like they have a combination of toxic teams, which I'm going to pivot to, and basically the increasing expectations of going up in level. And all of those things put together, maybe they have other stuff going on in their life too that's certainly not helping, and it's becoming overwhelming. So let's pivot over to teams. As I'm driving, I just want to make sure that I can kind of jump around and cover what I want to cover. With toxic teams, or if you're at an organization as a whole that the culture is not something that you're into, sometimes it takes being there to know, which is why I was saying, like, this person was writing about Amazon. I literally have zero experience at Amazon. I've interviewed for Amazon. I had offers from Amazon. The people that I talked to seemed lovely. So, like, my experience, very limited, but from what brief experience I had from interviewing, did not seem terrible, right? It seemed like it was a nice place. But that's all I got. So, maybe if I would have been hired, I would have been like, oh man, like, this is terrible. Or maybe depending on which team or part of the company, because when you have these enormous companies, you have to think that sometimes there are sub-organizations that are basically like smaller companies, and even those are very large. And sometimes the culture within those can be very different. So I don't have experience at Amazon. It's not fair for me to say, but maybe what I'm saying is, like, if you're employed somewhere, that might be your first opportunity to really see the culture. So when you're interviewing, just when people are like, what am I supposed to ask the interviewer? I don't like, there's a million things you could ask them. I don't think there's a secret question, but you might really care about what the culture's like. So finding ways that you can ask about the culture in not a super generic way, like, tell me how great the culture is. And someone's like, we're a family. And then you're like, well, that's a bullshit answer. Try to find ways to ask questions regarding culture that are going to, be informative for you, right? Like, what things would you be looking for, and ask questions specifically about that to try and highlight that. So when you're at a place, you might realize, okay, culture is not either what I expected, or maybe it is what you thought it was going to be, and you're like, okay, but I'm not, air quotes, like, cut out for it. And I don't think that people should be cut out for toxic cultures. That's like, I don't know, like, sure, if you can be resilient, that's great, but at the same time, like, instead of putting so much energy into, like, look, I'm surviving a toxic culture, I would say, like, what are we doing to get out of that? So when I briefly scrolled through the comments, I saw people saying, like, hey, time to brush up on your resume, right? Like, clearly you're sticking around somewhere and it's really not, it's not doing so well for you. And that's, again, not to criticize this person and say, oh, it's because you're bad, or like I was kind of just saying, like, oh, you're not cut out for a toxic work environment, so, like, you're not worthy. It's like, this probably is not a good fit for you, especially if it's getting to the point where you're having, like, physical symptoms of stress, right? You should not be going to work and crying from work. That's not what we want, if it wasn't obvious. And other people were kind of pointing out, like, this is extremely not sustainable. So people were basically suggesting, like, it's tough, but, like, it's probably time, like, as you're trying to survive there, basically shift your attention into getting your resume brushed up, start practicing lead code, do what you need to be doing to start interviewing. Now, I know the job market's tough right now. I would say it's exceedingly difficult, especially for more junior people. I'm not saying that makes it easy for other people that are more senior, but I would suspect that being able to apply for more senior roles would likely, I'm going to use the word easier, or maybe I should say, because that might trigger people, I want to say easier, not as impossible as applying for junior roles. I don't know, like, I feel like there's no way to say this without someone getting upset, because it's the internet. And they have Amazon on their resume. We talked about this in other videos, like, does that actually matter? And it's like, shouldn't, but it's kind of like, it's like saying, oh, I went to Harvard. It's like, that doesn't mean that you are necessarily the best educated person, but it carries some type of prestige with it. Right or wrong, it happens to. And I would say the same thing happens with names in tech. I'm not saying right or wrong, just that it seems to happen. So this person probably could, if they brushed up on their resume, practiced lead code and other interviewing techniques, that's probably a good path for them. But the reality is, and sort of the more generic thing that I want to touch on here, is that when you're in a toxic work environment, I would say, especially if it's a place like Amazon or just a large company, I don't like saying this because I don't like it to sound like defeatist, I guess, but your ability to change that work culture is probably limited, because it would take so much time and energy to do it, that if you're already at the point where you're, like, crying from work, physically stressed out, trying to change the culture of an organization that's that big I don't know. I don't want to say it's impossible, but like it's probably not worth your time. Now, if you're at a small company and you're having this type of thing happen, I might say, like, depending on how much you truly, like, love the idea of the company, love what it stands for, love the work you're doing, but something about the team culture, whatever else, like, that might be worth investing some time and energy into to try and change it. Right? The reason I say this is, like, when I was at a startup before Microsoft, I had seen when things were really good, and I had seen times where things were not really good, and I would stand up and try to drive change, because I'm like, I know we can do better than this, because we have done better. Like, we are regressing. So instead of just being like, oh, this is the way it is, it's like, no, like, I like it too much here. It's not just going to go this way. And then trying to drive change. Now, just to give you an example, like, that company had gone public. They had been acquired, like, they went back to private, and they have, different owners now. If that company culture's changed, like, that might be very difficult to go influence now. And the size of the company is much bigger. It's at least 2 or 3 times bigger than when I left. Right? And even when I was trying to drive some of that change, it would have been 2 to 3 times smaller than when I left, right? So it's I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying that, like, once there's a critical mass, it's so much more energy to try and drive change. So it's likely that instead of putting more energy into something like that, you're actually trying to look at what is your exit strategy. So we kind of talked a little bit about like, toxic teams, right? And by the way, I didn't like define toxic, but this might be a little bit more open-ended for people's own definitions. But basically, if you're in a team that's the regular operations are causing you to be stressed out, potentially crying from work, probably some things going on either within the team or within how your team interacts with leadership it's not very good. So talked a bit about that. We talked about the increasing expectations as you're going up in level. So now I kind of want to try to bring things maybe more full circle. We'll see people say things online around, like, hey, like, getting into software development just for the money, right? And you can do that with any career, really. If you're good enough at something, people will pay you for it. Seems like software development has a, reasonably, there's, different paths where you can have a pretty high salary or total compensation. But, like, the real question is, like, what's sustainable, right? Because when we do things like hyper optimize for a specific goal, like, I'm just going to hyper optimize for total compensation, the more you go down that path, because on paper it seems like the best, right? why would you not do that, right? We're trying to optimize things, we're working, like, don't we want to make more money? Like, yeah, I think that's a fair statement to make, but it's like, at what cost? Now, is it okay to be like, you know what, I'm going to go try to get one of these super high paying jobs, I'm going to accept that I might get burnt out after a year or two, and then, I'll kind of switch gears from there? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think that there's, like, a wrong thing to do, because it's going to be individual for everyone, right? Even for me, when I was working at a startup before Microsoft, I remember thinking, like, I know that the rest of my life is not working this way, but I think in order to be successful, both for the company that I was at and for myself, I said, I think that this needs to happen. Right? Like, I see this as a path to success, It's not the rest of my life, but I'm going to do what I think needs to happen here. And that meant, like, you know, overexerting myself. And you might be a young developer and you're like, I'm gonna keep picking on Amazon here because that's what came up on Reddit. No shade at Amazon, I'm just trying to be clear. But like, you're like, hey, okay, well, Nick made a video talking about this person's bad experience at Amazon, but like, screw it, like, I'm able to get this offer at Amazon, they're gonna pay me a ton of money, I'm gonna do it. But I'm only gonna stay there for a bit. And like, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think that what we have to do is be aware that that kind of thing is not sustainable. So again, if you're hyper optimizing on whether it's I'm just going to increase my level as much as possible, I've talked about this in other videos, or I'm just going to purely look for total compensation that goes up and up and up as I'm job hopping, at some point it's very likely that you'll reach a situation where it's just not sustainable for you. So when I talked about level jumping, I mean like you might be in a situation where you're truly not qualified for it, right? And that's, you know, it's going to be really hard to perform at that level. Or, like in this person's case, I'm not saying that they're not necessarily qualified, because it could be that they're the toxic environment aspect too. But the expectations are so high that trying to maintain those expectations is so exceedingly difficult that you cannot sustain it. So what's it worth to you? Because if you're getting more money and your entire life is terrible, like you're regularly crying, you're physically impacted from the stress of work, like what dollar amount and for how long is that worth it? I'd be very curious, right? I know that number is going to be different for different people, but like, sorry, I got to switch lanes and not going so well. Let me in. Okay. Right, because it's so, you know, it's so simple on paper to be looking at career advancement and saying, that's what I want to do, that's what I need to do. But if you're not balancing out the other parts of your life, like, what is that what you need to do? There's I don't know, I wouldn't call it a meme, but like there's a screenshot of like I guess it's a Reddit thread or something, Reddit post, where I think it might be another Amazon situation, so this is just me ripping on Amazon, apparently, not my intention. But someone was saying that they reached like, they're talking about how they reached an L7 level in their role, and how like their wife wants to divorce them now. Like they weren't present for like any part of like, you know, their child being birthed and stuff like that. And they're like, so I got my promotion, but like my wife is like, they want to leave me now. And it's like, I don't know if the post was a joke or like someone's real story. It's impossible to tell on the internet, I guess. But, you know, I could see that being a very real thing. Someone hyper optimized, laser focused to try and get promoted, did everything they needed to do it, but that meant that giving up everything else around them, right? And I guess it's not for me to tell people how to live their life at all. Like, it's absolutely your life, and you do what you do. But I think that my recommendation for folks is like awareness, right? Is that actually what you want? You know, would you be happy reaching in that example the L7 level with your, I don't know, your $1 million total comp, if that meant that you were building a life with someone and they're like, you know, that's now over. Like, is it worth it? And I don't know. I feel like, again, not for me to say, but for me, the answer is absolutely not. Right? We don't, like, my wife and I don't have kids, but if my wife was like, look, like, you've been so focused on work that, like, I want to get divorced, like, that's, to me, that's scary. Well, for, I mean, a lot of reasons, but scary that if it got to that point where it was a surprise to me, like, how out of touch would you have to be in your own relationship to not even realize that it's deteriorating to that point where, like, your partner is saying no, right? So I think that we just have to kind of do this reflection and understand, like, what is it worth? Now, with that said, I think if we're talking about, like, being with your partner, having families and stuff like that, there may be, and if you're on the internet, you probably know Alex Hormozy. I'm not saying that you have to like him or not, but I really did appreciate how Alex Hormozy put this in at least one video or post or something. Must have been a video. But he was speaking about how he looks like him and his wife, they're both extremely successful financially. So that they look at things in, like, terms of seasons, which is kind of a funny thing to say, I guess, but the idea being that you might have a busy season for someone in the relationship, which means at some point, and it's acknowledged that it's not a permanent thing, but there's going to be goals that people are trying to achieve or external factors that they don't have direct control over. And for them to achieve those goals, it's going to mean that they have, like, a busy season. Like, they need more attention onto something. That will mean less attention for their partner. And the idea being, like, you know, you have your partner to support you through that, right? It's not, you know, you're not communicating, you suddenly just, like, are neglecting your partner and they're like, what the hell is going on? But let's take this person, for example, in the Reddit post that we started with. If they're like, okay, well, I'm stressed from work, I'm basically falling apart, now I need to go start interviewing, like, that might be, in the short period of time, even more stress. And I don't know if this person, I can't recall if they were saying they were married or had a family, but, like, that would be, and just to bring it back to, like, the busy season thing, that might be a really important conversation to have with their partner, to say, like, look, like, things are not good right now, and they're probably going to get a little bit worse in the shorter term, but, like, I need to invest time and energy into interviewing, applying to jobs and interviewing, and, like, that's going to mean that I need your continued support, because I'm assuming and hoping that they're getting support through, you know, their challenging times with work. And that's kind of like a busy season to say, look, please, I need support. It's not a permanent thing, but help me get through this so that we can move forward together, right? So that I will be employed somewhere that is sustainable for me, that I can be effective, that I'm not physically stressed out, crying from work. Like, I need that. Could you imagine? Like, let's imagine that this person, and maybe, unfortunately, if you're going through a similar thing, like, if you're so stressed from work or crying from work regularly, how difficult would it be to, like, go home and have, like, you know, like, attention that you could divide to your partner meaningfully, or to your family, right? You're probably so stressed and overwhelmed that you're like, I don't have capacity for anything else in my life. I can't imagine that. Sorry, this person's holding a stop sign, but it doesn't make any sense to me. No one's stopping. Traffic's going both ways, and they're holding a stop sign up. Wow, we made it to work way faster. Thanks, Fastlane. So my takeaway from this entire video was like, you know, having some awareness of what's going on as you're navigating your career, because it's not about like getting a high score in the career. It's like, this is your life. And if you're going to be trading everything that's important in your life just to be able to have a title on paper, or to have a couple of extra dollars in the old bank account, might not be worth it, right? Might not. Maybe for you it is. There's nothing wrong with that, right? I'm not trying to guilt people into this, and I hope that's clear. I'm not trying to say, by the way, if you're focused on money, like, shame on you. I'm saying, for the people that don't realize, that's probably a bigger concern, right? They don't have awareness of it. And that's what I'm trying to bring visibility to, is like, if you haven't kind of thought through this and how this progresses, like, is that truly the path you just want to laser focus on? So with that said, folks, I'm going to go inside, get a meeting room ahead of time so I'm not scrambling. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this was helpful in some capacity, and I will see you next time. Take care.